One of the most fascinating figures of the entire Sengoku Jidai, at least for me, has always been Akechi Mitsuhide. From his early rise to his time in service to Ashikaga Yoshiaki to finally becoming one of Oda Nobunaga's top generals, with everything culminating in his spectacular betrayal at Honnoji in 1582. Mitsuhide stamped out his name as one of the most significant figures of the period. His story is one that not only fits perfectly, but more so iconically into the grand tale of the warring era. And it is a story that has been told time and time again, most notably through games like the Samurai Warriors series or Nobunaga's Ambition, but also through film and TV. In fact, a recent example, besides an NHK taiga drama about Mitsuhide, was one that I was not even fully aware of. One that came out in 2007, a film called Akechi Mitsuhide, The Man God Hated. Having not heard of it, there is a large chance I may have never reviewed it, were it not for one of my supporters on Patreon who kindly sent me a copy. So I just want to give a special thanks and shout out to Carl Cunningham for generously sending me this film. And with that said, let's dive in and discuss what even is Akechi Mitsuhide, the man God hated. As I said earlier, prior to being sent this film, I had never heard of it. In fact, simply trying to find information about it online seems to be a bit difficult, even with the fact that a copy of it can easily be ordered. However, I did eventually discover that this was a made-for-TV film which aired on Japanese television in 2007. Its Japanese title is Akechi Mitsuhide, Kami ni ai sare nakata otoko, which then roughly translates into its English name. But with that said, what is the film about? Obviously being centered around Akechi Mitsuhide, the main focus is his relationship towards his lord, Oda Nobunaga, who he inevitably betrays and kills later at the temple of Honnoji in 1582. But it's also a bit more than that. It's a story of Akechi Mitsuhide's own struggle, with pride, ambition, and what he truly wants for Japan's future, along with his own life. It goes deeper into his own home life with his wife and children than I would ever expect, and also showcases a budding rivalry between himself and another one of Oda Nobunaga's aspiring commanders, Hashiba Hideyoshi. But before we go any further into this, I need to mention two things. Firstly, this is not a historically accurate film, and I am pretty sure it wasn't even trying to be. It seems to be clear historical fiction, using real figures and events but also exaggerating things, changing details, and overall telling a story that is just different enough from reality that it can't be labeled as historically inaccurate, simply because it's obvious it was not trying to actually follow history in some spots, and was trying to tell a different story entirely, which is fine. I've always been a strong supporter of the idea that even if a film is historically inaccurate, it doesn't mean that it's automatically bad, because the story can still be very engaging nonetheless. But with this being a film that does have comparisons we can draw from real history, the second thing I want to mention is that there will be spoilers ahead in this review. Consider yourself warned. The film is told through the voice of Akechi Mitsuhide's wife, Tsumaki Hiroko. It is debated when she actually died in real history, but for the sake of the film, they went with the later date so that she would be alive throughout the events of the story. Because of this, the movie is sort of one big flashback and really starts around 1568, when Oda Nobunaga marched into Kyoto for the first time. Nobunaga was of course championing the exiled man who would be Shogun Ashikaga Yoshiaki, who he was sort of using as an excuse to legitimately launch his campaigns. This had caused Akechi Mitsuhide, a faithful supporter of Yoshiaki, to enter into the service of Nobunaga. All Mitsuhide wants to do is work hard to impress Nobunaga, so that he can advance his position. But unfortunately, Nobunaga does not really like him and continually ridicules him. This is accurate to history. But what is even more to handle is that he is constantly being pitted against another one of Nobunaga's commanders, a low-born man who had risen to the rank of samurai, Hashiba Hideyoshi. This competition between the two is sort of the main point of the film for most of its duration, as it goes through many of the major events throughout the following years. At least until Mitsuhide moves into his castle at Sakamoto. It is here, following Nobunaga's massacre at Mount Hiei, we start to see Mitsuhide's outlook change, where he begins to think more about the big picture, the end of the warring period, and long-lasting unification. He tries his hardest to work with the common people in the surrounding area to earn their trust and express how he wishes to one day live out the rest of his life as a farmer once the wars are done. And to this, facing different worldviews with his Lord Nobunaga and also continually being shamed and abused by him, he eventually hatches a plan. This is where the film deviates probably the most from real history. In the movie, Mitsuhide states that he wishes for a better and more proper successor to succeed Nobunaga, and that he believes his old rival Hashiba Hideyoshi to be the best man for the job. That is not what really happened in history, obviously. In reality, Mitsuhide saw Hideyoshi as one of his largest obstacles, not a true successor to Nobunaga. When Mitsuhide betrayed and assassinated Nobunaga in 1582, his own intentions were to seize power for himself. This was made very clear in his following actions, as he desperately tried to gain legitimacy and rally allies to his side. There were a plethora of reasons why Mitsuhide would have wanted Nobunaga dead, and the idea that it was all to get Hideyoshi in power is extremely far-fetched. But in the film, this does lead to a rather bizarre portrayal of the Battle of Yamazaki, where instead of an actual massive battle taking place as it did in real history, both Mitsuhide and Hideyoshi just have a Western-style cowboy standoff with matchlocks, where then Mitsuhide simply lets Hideyoshi win so that he could fulfill his destiny. This just all goes to sort of paint Mitsuhide as basically a martyr, giving up his life for the greater good of the nation, as the film then rolls through all of Hideyoshi's accomplishments, leading to his initial unification of Japan just 8 years later in 1590, but not mentioning anything of his downfall that came after. I will say it is a very interesting take, and one that I have never seen or heard of before. The idea that Mitsuhide was a visionary who was in the end willing to make the ultimate sacrifice to help put who he thought was a better leader in charge of the unification process. Yet with that said, I don't personally feel it was a story that needed to be told. I'm someone who really loves the figure of Mitsuhide. As I have said before, I firmly believe that he is one of the most fascinating figures of the whole Sengoku Jidai, perhaps even all of Japanese history, given the impact he would have. Even then, when it comes to enjoying the character, I don't really believe it is necessary to try and rebuild history around the idea that he had some deeper, noble motive behind his actions. You can still argue the merit and morality behind his choices without trying to completely reshuffle the narrative. I am by no means saying that the way the story was told was bad. It's totally fine, as it's obvious the film was trying to not be historically accurate in the end. I am more just questioning the necessity of the way in which it was told, if that makes any sense. And I will say, with the story told the way it was very important that they got the right actors to portray the roles of these historic figures, to which I am very happy to say that I found each portrayal to be, for the most part, great. Mitsuhide himself, played by Toshiaki Karasawa, was fantastic. He did a wonderful job bringing Mitsuhide to life, showing a man with deeper struggles, trying to balance between being a dutiful samurai, yet staying true to his own values. Oda Nobunaga shines great as well, played by Kamikawa Tayaka. He doesn't give a complete knockout performance, but he does do a great job in portraying such a unique and unorthodox figure who without a doubt always raises the level of tension in every scene he is in. And lastly, there is Hashiba Hideyoshi, played by Yanagiba Toshiro. Although I think he shines quite well in some scenes, there are others where I personally felt he took his emotion a bit too far, and it even got a little bit cheesy. Overall though, I think he did a fine job. The portrayals of the supporting cast is great as well. Figures such as Shibata Katsuie and Niwa Nagahide stand out as well represented as far as I'm concerned. But additionally, what helped my immersion besides the good depiction of historical figures was that the costumes and sets were equally as good. You can tell that the costume department was quality, as each samurai wore ornate, unique, and spectacular armor. I've seen some comments saying that some parts of the outfits may have gone a bit too far, perhaps in the kabuki direction, but honestly, for me it didn't take anything out of it, and personally I felt it to be one of the best elements in the film. The sets too were very well done. Nothing appeared to be too overused, and each felt mostly real enough. Keep in mind that this was a made-for-TV movie. These were great for what they were. Lastly, I want to touch a bit on the film's overall composition when it comes to cinematography, editing, and music. For cinematography, I have to say that it did an okay job. From some spectacular larger shots of armies and scenery, to some lackluster interior setups, it felt overall like a mixed bag. And it doesn't help that the editing too felt like it hasn't aged well, and more comes off like a product of its mid-2000s release time. This sort of leads into what would be a critique of the battles we see throughout the film, which, although are not shown in large scale, are still depicted well enough, and don't do so much to necessarily take the viewer out of it. As for the music, nothing really stands out at all, and it is a bit more on the cheesy side. But once again, keeping in mind that this was a made-for-TV film, any complaints about the composition when it comes to the cinematography, editing, and music can kinda be forgotten. The film does great for what it is, and fills my highest expectations for a made-for-TV film. I feel like we rarely get this kind of quality in made-for-TV movies, and it's great to see such effort being put into a project like this. So with all of that said, let's get into my final rating for the film. It is a bit hard to sort of judge given much of the circumstances I have mentioned, from its clear deviation from real history to its presentation as a film that was originally supposed to air on television. I have a hard time giving it a proper rating, especially because I wouldn't want my rating to reflect my actual opinion of the film in this case. So instead of giving it my usual rating out of 4 stars, I will instead simply just recommend it. I think Akechi Mitsuhide, The Man God Hated, is a great film for what it is, with fantastic depictions of historical figures, sets, and armor, all of which then go to tell an interesting, almost hot take of a story about one of the most interesting figures in Japanese history. The film itself does not seem to be viewable online anywhere, but it does appear to be easily available through purchasing your own DVD copy that comes out to be pretty cheap. I won't be posting websites to where you can get a copy here, but I will say they are very easy to find if you simply Google the name of the film. But with that all said, have you seen this film? It appears to be a bit more on the rare side, so I'm interested to see who else out there has seen it or at least heard of it. Whatever you think about it, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell if you enjoyed this video and found it to be most interesting.